Hello class, welcome to the week 4 part 1 online presentation. This week we're going to be going over theories of crime and how they can explain criminal behavior. Your objectives for this week are the following. Describe how theories of crime were developed, evaluate the contributions of classical, biological, and psychological criminal behavior, identify the difference between macro and micro theories of crime, compare and contrast the different features of strain theory, differential association, and labeling theory, discuss how social bond theory differs from other forms of macro-level theories of crime, and discuss the contributions of contemporary theories of crime in understanding criminal behavior. So let's go ahead and get started with first discussing what is a theory. So a theory is any set of ideas that's used to explain a particular concept or phenomenon. In this case, to explain crime. So criminologists are going to draw from theories to help explain what may cause crime and why people engage in certain criminal behaviors. So within theories of crime, we have micro theories of crime and macro theories of crime. So the micro theories of crime are focused more on the individual differences between individuals who do engage in crime and individuals who do not engage in crime, while the macro theories of crime seek more to explain why individuals engage in crime at a societal level, meaning it's not the individual differences between people that may cause crime, but what's going on in their society or their community. So modern criminological theory starts back in the 18th century, which is the 1700s, which is when the classical school began, and then it kept developing up until today, where we have more contemporary theories. We have two different schools of thought. One is aligned with Cesare Beccaria, which is the classical school of criminology, and then the positivist school of criminology, which is aligned with Cesare Lombroso. So we're going to go ahead and discuss these two schools of thought up ahead. So first we have Beccaria, and we can't discuss the classical school of criminology without discussing Beccaria. So Beccaria's work was based on a kind of free will, rationalistic hedonism, a philosophical tradition going back many centuries before the 1700s. Beccaria proposed a simple model of human choice that was based on the rational calculation of costs and benefits. So think of risk versus reward or pain versus pleasure. And on the basis of this model, he argued that punishments should be proportional to the seriousness of offenses so that the cost of crime will always exceed its reward, meaning the risk will always exceed the reward. Potential offenders then would be deterred, that is, a rational calculation by a potential criminal would lead them to avoid committing a crime. And today this approach became the basis for a lot of modern, or all modern criminal justice systems. Beccaria also argued against the death penalty and the torture of criminals, and he suggested that offenders needed to be treated with fairness and dignity. He also supported the use of citizen juries and eliminating bias in sentencing and punishment of offenders. Remember, he wasn't alive during our lifetime when things were more fair, excuse me. Then we also have Jeremy Bentham. Now, Bentham argued that when punishing an offender, there should be mitigating factors that are taken into account to determine the appropriate punishment of an individual. So, for example, he thought that young offenders should be treated differently than adult offenders as a result of their lower age, their lower maturity levels, and their decision-making abilities. He also suggested that lesser punishments could be equally, if not more effective, than extreme and harsh punishments. His most significant contribution to criminological theory came with a book called An Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation back in 1789, which again, similar time period to Beccaria. And he is known for his development in the Panopticon. So the Panopticon is displayed on page 71. And that's a circular structure of a larger complex, right, designed to allow a person or small group to see their actions in a larger structure as they are always being observed. And in this case, in page 71, it's being used in a prison. And he also believes, like in this case of using the Panopticon, when someone could always be seeing what inmates are doing, that it would inspire good behavior by the inmates. So now we have the positive school, which is the biological and psychological theories of crime. And the biological theories of crime focus on characteristics that are genetic to explain why individuals engage in criminal behaviors, while the psychological theories of crime focus on environmental factors like childhood experience, cognitive development, and personality characteristics to explain why individuals engage in these criminal behaviors. Now, when we look at the biological theories of crime, they suggest that crime occurs because an inherited trait in an individual, right? So we do not have the free will to desist from committing a crime. We cannot control ourselves. So, for example, take the mass shooter of Sandy Hook. According to this, he would have no control over his actions because of a biological trait that he inherited. So an example would also be a physical appearance, and this is most consistent with the work of Lombroso and Ferrero, who are contributors and representatives through their work to display the biological theories of crime. Now, just like we can't talk about the classical school without talking about Beccaria, we cannot talk or discuss a positive school and biological theories of crime without discussing Lombroso. So again, look back at the time that he was born, 1835. So we've now moved on to the 19th century. He was a medical doctor, and he did study biological traits in individuals. And Lombroso relied on Darwin's theory of evolution to argue that criminals were biological throwbacks to an earlier evolutionary age, and people more primitive and less highly evolved than their non-criminal counterparts. So he was a medical doctor, and he did do research, and he published his findings of his research in a book in 1876. And in that book, Lombroso argued that various physical characteristics were linked to crime. So notice how I say linked, not necessarily they cause crime, but these characteristics, which included deviations in the head size and shape, asymmetry of the face, large jaws and cheekbones, usually a large or small ears or ears that stand out from the head, fleshy lips, abnormal teeth, receding chin, abundant hair or wrinkles, long arms, extra fingers or toes, or asymmetry of the brain. And he argued that these characteristics were said to resemble the characteristics of lower animals, such as monkeys and chimpanzees. So if you look at page 72 on the bottom left, you have an example of what he was talking about. So Lombroso was the first to use the scientific method to explain criminal behavior, and that is why through the use of the scientific method and using data, he became the father of modern criminology, because today criminologists also produce findings through the gathering of data and observing any type of phenomenon. So he inspired this. Then we have William Ferrero, who also worked with Lombroso, but instead studied the criminal behavior of women instead of men. And he recorded different irregularities, such as narrow foreheads and prominent cheekbones, similar to Lombroso had done with the men, and concluded that women had fewer degenerative characteristics compared to males, suggesting they were more primitive and less evolved than men. So obviously today this would be a controversial finding, and suggested that the evil tendencies of women are more numerous and more varied than men's. He also suggested that female offenders were more likely to experience suppressed maternal instincts and possess fewer ladylike qualities, and they were less sensitive to pain, less compassionate, and full of hate. Basically, criminal women had the worst characteristics versus the males. Now we have psychological theories of crime. So psychologically based criminologists explain criminal behavior by different individual factors, and these could be deficiencies in early childhood socialization of experiences, and this may possibly lead into different gaps in cognitive development. Studies within psychological theories of crime Look at how behaviors like aggression, violence, impulsivity are learned behaviors rather than behaviors that someone may be born with. Psychological theories of crime see criminal behavior as something that people are compelled toward rather than action of free will or rational choice.